Welcome to my channel, a list that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The crystal chandeliers above me trembled with each footstep of the wealthy mourners, their designer shoes clicking against the marble floors of the Belmont estate, like a countdown to something I couldn't name. I'd been serving champagne and canapes at high society events for 3 years now, but I'd never felt the weight of death pressing down on a room quite like this. The air smelled of lilies, too many lilies, their cloying sweetness mixing with expensive perfume and the sharp tang of grief that even money couldn't mask. My fingers ached from gripping the silver tray. I'd been on my feet for 6 hours, weaving through clusters of men in $1,000 suits and women draped in black silk that probably cost more than my annual rent. They spoke in hushed tones about the deceased, their voices carrying that particular reverence reserved for the powerful and the feared. "Such a tragedy," a woman whispered near me, diamonds glittering at her throat. "Alessandro Caruso, dead at 38. Heart attack, they said," her companion replied, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Who would have thought? A man like that. I shouldn't have been listening. I was supposed to be invisible. That's what Maggie, my supervisor, had drilled into me during training. Serve, smile if necessary, and disappear. We were ghosts in their world, nothing more. But something about this funeral felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the men gathered in tight circles, their eyes constantly scanning the room. Maybe it was the bulges I'd noticed beneath several suit jackets. Guns, I realized with a cold shock. Or maybe it was the casket itself, positioned at the far end of the ballroom like a grotesque centerpiece, surrounded by enough flowers to stock a florist for a month. I'd heard whispers about Alessandro Caruso. Everyone in the service industry had. He owned half the restaurants in the city, they said, though everyone knew that was just the surface. Beneath the legitimate businesses ran rivers of darker enterprise, protection rackets, underground gambling, things people like me didn't speak about if we valued our safety. The Caruso family had ruled the city's underworld for 3 generations, and Alessandro had been their crown prince, then their king. And now, apparently, their corpse. I moved through the crowd, offering champagne to people who took glasses without seeing my face. My feet throbbed in the cheap heels I'd bought at a discount store, and I could feel a blister forming on my left heel. The black dress I wore, the only formal thing I owned, was starting to stick to my back, despite the air conditioning that kept the ballroom at a temperature that probably cost more per hour than I made in a day. "Miss." A hand touched my elbow, and I turned to find a man with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. "Refresh the flowers near the casket." "Some of the lilies are wilting," I blinked. "I'm serving drinks, sir. I'm not..." "Now." His voice didn't rise, but something in it made my stomach clench. This wasn't a request. I set down my tray on a nearby table and walked toward the casket, my heart hammering against my ribs. The crowd seemed to part around me, and I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made my skin prickle. As I approached, I could see the casket more clearly, rich mahogany with gold handles, the lid open to display the deceased to his mourners. I'd never seen a dead body before. My parents had been cremated after the accident, their caskets closed at the service I'd barely been able to afford. I didn't know what I expected. But as I reached the flowers and began adjusting the wilting lilies with trembling hands, I couldn't help but look. Alessandro Caruso was beautiful, even in death. That was my first thought, and it came with a wash of shame. His face was perfectly composed, skin pale but not gray, dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my car, back when I'd had a car, before it died, and I couldn't afford to fix it. His hands were folded over his chest, and even in stillness, there was something powerful about him, something that whispered of danger and command. My fingers brushed against a lily, and a petal fell. Drifting down to land on the casket's edge, I reached to remove it, leaning closer, and that's when I saw it. His throat moved. It was so slight I thought I'd imagined it. A flutter, barely visible, just beneath the skin where his pulse should be. I froze, my hand suspended in midair, staring at his neck. Nothing. No movement. I must have been seeing things, exhaustion playing tricks on my eyes after hours of there. Again, the smallest tremor, a ripple beneath pale skin. My breath caught. I looked at his chest, watching with an intensity that made my vision blur at the edges, and then I saw it. The faintest rise and fall. So subtle it could have been a trick of the light, but it wasn't. His chest was moving, breathing. He was alive. The room spun. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling the gasp that wanted to escape. This couldn't be real. They'd examined him, hadn't they? Doctors, medical professionals. Someone had to have confirmed. But looking at him now, at that barely perceptible movement, I knew with absolute certainty that Alessandro Caruso was not dead. I should have walked away, should have told myself I was wrong, that grief and exhaustion were making me see things that weren't there. Instead, I did the stupidest, most reckless thing I'd ever done in my 26 years of life. I pressed my fingers against his neck, searching for a pulse. His skin was warm, not cold, not lifeless, warm. And there, beneath my trembling fingertips, I felt it. Slow, so slow it was almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. A heartbeat. "He's not dead," I whispered, the words falling from my lips before I could stop them. No one heard me. The conversations continued around me, a low buzz of voices discussing business and territory and things I didn't understand. I pressed harder, feeling for that pulse again, needing to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. "He's not dead," I said, louder this time. A few heads turned. I saw confusion in their eyes, then dismissal. The crazy waitress, probably upset by the sight of a corpse. But I didn't care about their judgment. I could feel his heartbeat getting stronger beneath my fingers, as if my touch was somehow calling him back from wherever he'd been. "He's not dead," I shouted, my voice cracking with urgency and fear and something wild that I couldn't name. The room went silent. Every eye turned to me. I saw shock, anger, disbelief. And then I saw fear, real, visceral fear, flash across several faces. "Get her away from him," someone growled. And suddenly there were hands on my arms, pulling me back. But I fought them, driven by an instinct I didn't understand, reaching for Alessandro's hand. "Please, you have to listen to me. He's alive. I can feel his pulse. She's hysterical," a woman declared. "Someone remove her before she causes a scene." "I'm not hysterical. Check his pulse. Please, just check." And then everything changed. Alessandro Caruso's eyes opened. They were the color of dark honey shot through with gold, and they fixed on my face with an intensity that stole the breath from my lungs. For a moment, the entire world narrowed to those eyes, to the way they seemed to see straight through to my soul. His lips parted, and I heard him draw in a breath, deep, shuddering like a man surfacing from drowning. The ballroom erupted into chaos. People were screaming, backing away from the casket as if it contained something supernatural. Others rushed forward, shouting orders I couldn't parse through the ringing in my ears. Someone was calling for a doctor. Someone else was demanding to know what kind of sick joke this was. And through it all, Alessandro Caruso sat up in his casket, those golden eyes never leaving my face. "You," he said, his voice rough with disuse, but carrying an authority that cut through the pandemonium. "Who are you?" I couldn't speak. My tongue felt thick in my mouth. My throat closed with terror and awe, and the dawning realization of what I'd just done. I'd stopped a funeral. I'd touched a man everyone thought was dead. I'd brought him back to life, or revealed he'd never left it in the first place. "Answer me." His hand shot out, faster than should have been possible for someone who'd been unconscious moments before, and his fingers wrapped around my wrist. His grip was firm, warm, alive in a way that sent electricity racing up my arm. "What is your name?" Emma," I stammered. "Emma Sterling. I'm just the waitress." I didn't mean to. I saw him breathing, and I thought, "She's lying." The voice came from somewhere in the crowd, sharp with accusation. "This is some kind of trick. She must have—" Silence. Alessandro didn't shout. but the single word carried such weight that the entire room obeyed instantly. He was still holding my wrist, his thumb pressed against my pulse point as if he was measuring my heartbeat the way I'd measured his. "How did you know?" "I saw your throat move," I whispered. "And then your chest. You were breathing, so I checked your pulse and everyone out." He released my wrist and turned to address the crowd, and I saw something shift in him. The confusion in his eyes hardened into command, the vulnerability of waking replaced by something cold and calculating. "Now, Alessandro, you need medical attention," someone began. "I need answers." His gaze swept the room, and I watched people flinch away from it like they'd been burned. Someone tried to bury me alive. Someone in this room thought I was dead, or wanted me to be, and now I'm going to find out who. "Marco." He pointed at a man built like a wall, all muscle and menace. "Clear the room. Keep everyone's names. No one leaves the grounds." The ballroom began to empty, but slowly, with people casting backward glances at Alessandro, as if they still couldn't believe what they were seeing. I tried to slip away with them, but his hand caught mine again, pulling me back with surprising gentleness. "Not you," he said quietly, meant only for my ears. "You stay." I wanted to argue, wanted to wrench my hand free and run until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, but something in his eyes held me captive more effectively than his grip. A mixture of curiosity and something darker, something that looked almost like possession. "Why?" I managed to ask. "Because," Alessandro Caruso said, his thumb tracing a circle on the inside of my wrist that made my pulse jump beneath his touch. "You're either the woman who saved my life, or you're part of the conspiracy that nearly ended it. And until I know which, Emma Sterling, you're not going anywhere." The last mourner filtered out, leaving us alone in a ballroom full of flowers, meant for a funeral that would never be. The doors closed with a heavy thud that sounded like a prison sentence. Alessandro stood from his casket, and I realized for the first time how tall he was, how he seemed to fill the space around him with an energy that was almost overwhelming. He swayed slightly, and instinct overrode my fear. I reached out to steady him, my hands landing on his chest. Beneath the expensive fabric of his suit, I could feel his heart beating strong and steady now. So different from that threadbare pulse I'd discovered at his throat. "You should sit," I said. "You were barely alive 5 minutes ago. I need to know what happened to me." His hands covered mine, pressing them flat against his chest. "And I need to know why you, of all people, were the one to notice. Why you cared enough to speak up when no one else did." I didn't have an answer for that. I didn't understand it myself, but standing there with my hands trapped against his heartbeat in a ballroom that smelled of death and lilies, I felt the first tremor of something that would change everything. Alessandro Caruso was alive because of me. And somehow, I knew that meant my life would never be the same. The medical team arrived within 20 minutes, rushing through the ballroom doors with equipment and urgency. I tried to step back, to give them space, but Alessandro's grip on my hand tightened, keeping me anchored at his side like I was his lifeline to consciousness. "Don't," he said simply, and I stayed. Dr. Reeves, a gray-haired man with steady hands and worried eyes, examined Alessandro with practiced efficiency while asking questions in a low, careful voice. Blood pressure, pupil response, heart rate. I watched the numbers on the monitors climb from dangerously low to something closer to normal and felt a strange sense of relief that I had no right to feel. This man was a stranger. More than that, he was dangerous. Everyone in the city knew what the Caruso name meant. "You were poisoned," Dr. Reeves finally announced, snapping off his latex gloves. "Tetrodotoxin, if I had to guess. It mimics death, slows the heart rate and breathing to nearly imperceptible levels. In the right dose, it can make someone appear dead for hours, even to trained medical personnel." "Pufferfish toxin," Alessandro said, his voice still rough, but growing stronger with each passing minute. "Someone wanted me in the ground. Someone almost succeeded." Dr. Reeves packed his equipment with sharp, angry movements. "Another few hours in that casket and you would have suffocated. The dose was calculated to keep you under just long enough for burial. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." I felt sick. The champagne I'd sipped during my break churned in my stomach. Someone had planned this, had poisoned Alessandro Caruso with a substance that would make him appear dead, had fooled doctors and family members, had arranged for him to be buried alive. The cruelty of it made my skin crawl. I want toxicology reports on everything I consumed in the last 48 hours, Alessandro ordered. Food, drinks, medication. Everything. Already being arranged, a new voice made me jump. I turned to find a man standing in the doorway, tall and lean, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that assessed me like I was a threat to be neutralized. The house has been locked down. No one in or out until we find who did this. Good. Alessandro finally released my hand, and I felt the loss of his warmth like a physical thing. He stood, ignoring Dr. Reeves's protests, and straightened his suit jacket with a composure that seemed impossible for someone who'd just woken from a poison-induced coma. Dante, this is Emma Sterling, the waitress who saved my life. Emma, this is Dante Russo, my head of security. Dante's gaze sharpened on me, and I resisted the urge to shrink back. The waitress? You're certain? I'm certain she was the only one who noticed I was still breathing. Alessandro's tone carried an edge that made Dante's jaw tighten, which raises interesting questions about everyone else in that room. I'll begin immediate interrogations, Dante said, starting with the medical examiner who declared you dead. Do that. And Dante? Alessandro waited until his security head met his eyes. Put someone on Miss Sterling. 24-hour protection. My heart stopped. What? No. I don't need... You stopped my funeral, Alessandro interrupted, turning those golden eyes back to me. You exposed whoever tried to kill me. They won't appreciate that interference. The reality of what I'd done hit me like ice water. I'd thought I was saving a life, and I had. But I'd also painted a target on my own back. Whoever had poisoned Alessandro Caruso, whoever had been confident enough to stage his death and arrange his burial, would see me as a threat. A witness. A problem to be eliminated. I'm nobody. I whispered, fear coating my tongue. I work 3 jobs to pay rent on a studio apartment. I don't have anything to do with your world. They won't care about me. They'll care that you ruined their plan. Alessandro stepped closer, and I caught his scent. Sandalwood and something darker, like smoke and danger. They'll care that you're a loose end, and in my world, Emma, loose ends don't survive long. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist that I could take care of myself, that I'd go home and lock my doors and pretend this night had never happened. But looking into his eyes, I knew he was right. I'd stepped into something far beyond my understanding, and there was no stepping back out. What do you want from me? I asked. For now? Answers. He gestured to Dante, who moved to stand by the door, guarding it, I realized. Guarding me. Tell me everything. What you saw, when you saw it, why you decided to speak up. So I did. I told him about serving champagne and trying to be invisible, about being ordered to fix the flowers, about seeing that flutter in his throat and the shallow rise of his chest. I told him about checking his pulse, about feeling his heartbeat so faint I thought I might be imagining it, about shouting because something in me couldn't stay silent while a living man was mourned as dead. Alessandro listened with an intensity that made me feel stripped bare. He didn't interrupt, didn't question, just absorbed every word like he was filing it away for later analysis. When I finished, silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of voices. Dante's men, I guessed, beginning their investigation. You risked yourself, Alessandro finally said. You had to know how it would look, a waitress screaming that the guest of honor wasn't dead. You had to know they'd think you were crazy, or worse. I didn't really think, I admitted. I couldn't let them bury you alive. Why not? The question caught me off guard. What? Why not let them bury me? He moved closer, and I found myself backing up until my legs hit a chair. I'm not a good man, Emma. I've done things that would make you run screaming. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on fear and blood. Why did someone like you care what happened to someone like me? I didn't have an answer that made sense. But staring up at him, at the sharp lines of his face and the shadows in his eyes, I found myself saying, because everyone deserves to breathe. no matter who they are or what they've done. Nobody deserves to be buried alive. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that controlled facade that let me glimpse raw emotion beneath, surprise maybe, or recognition of something he hadn't expected to find. "You're going to stay here," he said, and it wasn't a question. "At the estate, under my protection until we find who did this." "I can't." Panic clawed at my throat. "I have work tomorrow, 3 shifts. I'll lose my jobs if I don't show up, and I can't afford. I'll pay you." He said it like money was nothing, like my entire precarious existence could be solved with a checkbook. "Whatever you make in a month, I'll triple it. You stay here, you stay safe, and you help me figure out who tried to kill me." "Help you? I don't know anything about—" "You notice things." His hand came up to cup my jaw, tilting my face toward his, and the touch sent electricity racing down my spine. "You saw what trained doctors missed. You paid attention when everyone else was too busy performing grief to notice their boss was still breathing. That makes you valuable, Emma Sterling. And in my world, valuable things are protected." I should have said no, should have insisted on going home, on taking my chances, on maintaining the careful distance between his world and mine, but his thumb was tracing my cheekbone, and his eyes held something that looked almost like wonder, and I was so tired of being invisible. "1 week," I heard myself say, "just until you find who did this." Alessandro smiled, and it transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. 1 week, he agreed, though something in his tone suggested he was lying. The guest room they gave me was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens lit by subtle landscape lighting. A 4-poster bed dominated the space with linens that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And the bathroom featured a soaking tub that could fit 3 people. I stood in the doorway, clutching the small bag that Dante's men had retrieved from my locker at work, feeling completely out of place. "There's a panic button by the bed," a woman's voice said behind me. I turned to find a striking brunette in her 30s, dressed in black slacks and a crisp white shirt. "Press it, and security will be here in 30 seconds. You'll have guards outside your door all night." "Are you—" I trailed off, unsure how to ask who she was. "Sophia, Alessandro's sister." She extended a hand and I shook it, noting the strength in her grip. "I hear you saved my brother's life." I just noticed he was breathing and risked looking like a fool to say so. Sophia's dark eyes assessed me with the same intensity I'd seen in Alessandro's gaze. That took courage. Or stupidity. I haven't decided which. Probably stupidity, I admitted. She laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise her. "I like you. That's rare. Most people who enter this house are either terrified or calculating. You just seem lost." "I am lost." I sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the night finally catching up with me. My hands were shaking, I realized. Had been shaking for hours. A few hours ago, I was serving champagne. Now I'm in a Mafia Don's mansion with armed guards outside my door because someone tried to bury your brother alive. How is this my life? Sophia sat beside me, and for a moment, she seemed to shed the armor of the Caruso name. "You did something good tonight, Emma. You saved someone who probably didn't deserve saving, but he's my brother. And for that, you have my gratitude. And my protection." "Why would I need your protection?" I asked. Alessandro already said, "From him." Her voice dropped low. "My brother is complicated, dangerous, and he looks at you like you're a puzzle he needs to solve. Be careful, Emma. In our world, the people we care about become targets, and Alessandro cares about very few things." Before I could process that warning, she was gone, leaving me alone in a room that felt like a gilded cage. I showered, washing away the smell of lilies and champagne, and changed into the pajamas someone had thoughtfully provided. Silk, of course, because apparently, even sleepwear in this house cost more than I made in a week. I should have been exhausted. Instead, I lay in that enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about Alessandro's eyes opening to find me, about his hand on my wrist, measuring my pulse, about the way he'd said my name like he was memorizing it. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless, full of dreams of caskets and golden eyes and hands that held too tight. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was late for work, that I'd overslept and would lose my morning shift at the diner. Then I saw the room around me, expensive and unfamiliar, and remembered. The funeral. The pulse beneath my fingers. Alessandro Caruso. Alive. A knock on the door made me jump. "Come in," I called, expecting Sophia or maybe a maid. Alessandro entered carrying a tray with coffee and pastries, and I forgot how to breathe. He'd changed from his funeral suit into dark jeans and a black shirt that did nothing to hide the lean muscle beneath. His hair was still damp from a shower, and without the formal clothing, he looked younger, more human. Still dangerous, that would never change, but approachable in a way that made my stomach flip. "You're awake," he said, setting the tray on the nightstand. "I wasn't sure if you'd sleep through the morning." I pulled the covers up higher, suddenly aware that I was wearing silk pajamas in bed while he stood over me. "What time is it?" "Almost noon." He settled into the chair by the window, with an ease that suggested he'd done this before, visited women in their bedrooms, brought them coffee, made them feel simultaneously special and trapped. "You needed rest." The adrenaline crash from last night was probably brutal. It had been. My whole body ached like I'd run a marathon. "Did you find out who poisoned you?" His expression darkened. "We have suspects. The toxin was in my whiskey, a bottle of Macallan 1926 that was supposedly a gift from the Marchetti family. They claim ignorance, of course. Do you believe them?" "I believe someone wanted me to think it was them." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and I saw the strategist beneath the surface. "The Marchettis have been allies for 20 years. Killing me would start a war they can't win. Framing them for my death, though, that would eliminate 2 threats at once." I reached for the coffee, needing something to do with my hands. It was perfect. The right temperature, the right amount of cream, like he'd somehow known how I took it. So what now? Now I find who's actually responsible. And I keep you close while I do it. His eyes met mine over the rim of his own coffee cup. "You're under my protection, Emma. That means you don't leave this house without guards. You don't talk to anyone I haven't vetted. You don't take risks. You're talking about me like I'm yours to command. In this house, under my roof, you are." He said it without apology, without hesitation. "I know you don't understand my world yet. But in it, protection is ownership. Safety is control. And I control everything in my domain." I should have been angry, should have thrown his coffee in his face and demanded to leave. Instead, I found myself asking, "For how long?" "Until the threat is eliminated." He stood, moving to the window to stare out at his gardens. "Or until you decide you'd rather take your chances on your own. That's not a choice. That's a threat wrapped in protection." "Yes," he agreed, turning back to me. "It is. Welcome to my world, Emma. Nothing here is ever simple." He left me then, with coffee going cold and pastries I couldn't eat, staring at the closed door and wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Outside my window, I could see guards patrolling the grounds. Inside, I could hear the low murmur of voices as Alessandro's people conducted their investigation. And somewhere in this massive house, a man I'd saved from burial was treating me like precious cargo that needed to be locked away for safekeeping. I'd wanted to be seen, to matter, to be something more than invisible. I should have been more careful what I wished for. 3 days passed in a blur of luxury and captivity. I woke each morning to breakfast delivered by silent staff, spent my afternoons in the library or gardens under the watchful eyes of guards, and ate dinners in the formal dining room with Alessandro, Sophia, and occasionally Dante, discussing topics I barely understood. Territory disputes, supply chains, political alliances that had nothing to do with elections and everything to do with power. Alessandro was always there, a constant presence that I couldn't escape even when he wasn't in the room. I felt him in the guards stationed outside my door, in the clothes that appeared in my closet perfectly tailored to my size, in the way the staff deferred to his unspoken commands about my comfort. He was weaving a web around me, silken and inescapable, and I didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. On the 4th morning, I woke to raised voices downstairs. I pulled on a robe, cashmere because apparently even bathrobes in this house were obscenely expensive, and crept to the top of the staircase, driven by curiosity that was probably going to get me killed. "Don't care what her story is," a woman's voice was saying, sharp with anger. "She's a liability, Alessandro. A waitress with no training, no background, no reason to be here except that you've decided she's special. She saved my life, Valentina." Alessandro's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "That makes her more than special. Or it makes her the perfect plant." The woman, Valentina, spoke with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Think about it. She happens to be serving at your funeral. She happens to notice what trained doctors missed. She happens to scream loud enough to stop the entire proceeding. It's too convenient." I felt sick. Was that what they thought? That I'd been part of the conspiracy? "Dante's investigation cleared her," Alessandro said. "She's worked 3 jobs for the past 2 years, lives in a studio apartment in the warehouse district, has no criminal record, no suspicious contacts. She's exactly what she appears to be. A woman trying to survive who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Or the wrong place," Valentina countered. "She's a distraction, Alessandro. You're so focused on protecting your little hero that you're not seeing the bigger picture." "The bigger picture?" Alessandro said, his voice dropping to a register that made my skin prickle with warning, "is that someone in my organization tried to kill me. Someone close enough to poison my private stock, knowledgeable enough to use a toxin that would mimic death, bold enough to think they could bury me and take over my empire. Until I find that person, everyone is suspect. Everyone except the woman who had nothing to gain from saving me and everything to lose." Silence fell, heavy and tense. I should have retreated to my room, but I couldn't move, frozen at the top of the stairs like a child eavesdropping on adult conversations. "You're sleeping with her." Valentina's accusation cut through the quiet like a blade. "Not yet." My breath caught. The casual certainty in those 2 words made heat flood my face, and something dangerous curl in my stomach. "But you want to," Valentina pressed. "I can see it in the way you look at her, like she's something precious instead of a complication that's going to get you killed." "What I want," Alessandro said slowly, deliberately, "is none of your concern. You're my accountant, Valentina, not my keeper. Do your job and leave my personal life alone. Your personal life affects the family business. You know that better than anyone." Footsteps approached the stairs, and I scrambled back toward my room, heart hammering. "She's making you soft, Alessandro. And in our world, soft men don't survive." I made it back to my room just as I heard her heels clicking up the stairs. I closed the door softly and leaned against it, trying to process what I'd heard. Alessandro wanted me, not just as a curiosity or a puzzle to solve, but as something more. And that realization terrified me almost as much as the poison and the guards, and the constant awareness that I was swimming in waters far too deep for someone like me. A knock made me jump. "Emma?" Alessandro's voice came through the door. "I know you're awake. I can hear you breathing." I opened the door, trying to appear casual, like I hadn't just been eavesdropping on his private conversation. He stood in the hallway, dressed in charcoal slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking at me with those golden eyes that saw too much. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough to know that people think I'm either a conspirator or a distraction." I lifted my chin, refusing to be cowed. Which am I? Neither. He stepped into my room without invitation, and I let him because stopping him felt impossible. "You're a complication I didn't anticipate. But that doesn't make you unwelcome. Valentina seems to think I'm making you soft. Valentina thinks anything that doesn't involve profit margins is a weakness." He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds like he was seeing something I couldn't. "She's not wrong that you're affecting my judgment, but she's wrong about the nature of that effect." "What does that mean?" He turned back to me, and the intensity in his gaze made me take an involuntary step back. "It means that for the first time in 10 years, I'm thinking about something other than business and survival. It means that when I should be focused solely on finding who tried to kill me, I'm instead making sure you have fresh flowers in your room and coffee that's prepared exactly how you like it. It means, Emma, that you've become important to me in a way that defies logic. We barely know each other," I whispered. I know you risked yourself for a stranger. I know you have 3 jobs because you're too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to give up even when life keeps knocking you down. I know you take your coffee with cream and no sugar, that you read poetry when you think no one's watching, that you have nightmares about caskets and wake up reaching for something you can't name. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, and suddenly he was there, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell that combination of sandalwood and danger that was becoming familiar. I know more about you than you think, Emma Sterling, and everything I learn makes me want to know more. My back hit the wall. I hadn't even realized I was retreating. This is crazy. You're a crime lord. I'm nobody. This doesn't make sense. Nothing about us makes sense. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone the way he had that first night, but sense is overrated. What I feel when I look at you, what I felt when I opened my eyes and saw you standing over my casket like some avenging angel. That's real. And I haven't felt anything real in longer than I can remember. Alessandro, tell me to stop. His other hand braced against the wall beside my head, caging me in without touching me. Tell me you don't feel this thing between us and I'll back away. I'll keep you safe and protected and at a distance. But if you can't say that, Emma, if there's even a part of you that feels what I feel, then stop running from it. I couldn't speak. My tongue was thick in my mouth, my breath coming too fast, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. He was right. I did feel it. This magnetic pull that made no sense. This attraction that defied every logical objection my mind could produce. I felt it in the way my pulse jumped when he entered a room, in the way I found myself listening for his voice, in the dreams I'd been having that were far more dangerous than nightmares. I'm scared, I finally managed. Good. His thumb moved to trace my lower lip, and I felt that touch everywhere. Fear means you're smart enough to understand what this is, what I am. What being close to me could cost you. Then why are you pushing this? Because I'm a selfish bastard who takes what he wants. He leaned closer, his lips barely an inch from mine. And I want you, Emma. I want you in ways that have nothing to do with gratitude or protection. I want you in my bed, in my life, in places no one else has been allowed to reach. And I'm done pretending otherwise. He was giving me a choice. I could see it in the tension in his shoulders, in the way he held himself back, despite every word declaring his intent. One word from me, and he'd retreat. One rejection, and he'd put that distance back between us. Lock me in this gilded cage as nothing more than a protected witness. I should have said no. Should have reminded myself of every reason this was dangerous and wrong and destined to end badly. Should have protected myself the way I'd learned to do after my parents died, and the world proved over and over that I was on my own. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was like touching lightning. His mouth claimed mine with a hunger that stole my breath, one hand sliding into my hair while the other wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him. I gasped, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't remember any of the reasons this was a terrible idea. I'd been kissed before. Quick, fumbling encounters with boys who didn't know what they were doing and didn't care to learn. This was different. Alessandro kissed like he did everything else, with absolute control and devastating precision, learning what made me melt, what made me whimper, what made me forget my own name. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, and I could see the gold in his eyes had darkened to amber. That, he said roughly, was either the best decision you've ever made or the worst. Time will tell which. Probably the worst, I admitted, but I couldn't make myself regret it. Probably, he agreed. Then he kissed me again, softer this time, tender in a way that felt more dangerous than passion. But you're mine now, Emma. For better or worse, you've tied yourself to me, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. A sharp knock interrupted whatever I might have said. Dante's voice came through the door, urgent and tight. "Boss, we have a situation." Alessandro's jaw tightened, but he stepped back, putting professional distance between us, with an ease that spoke of years of practice. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that requires your immediate attention. In your office, now." He looked at me, something fierce and possessive in his gaze. "Stay here." Don't leave this room until I come back for you. Alessandro. Please. The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like he wasn't used to asking for anything. Just this once, Emma. Don't argue. Stay here and stay safe. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with swollen lips and a racing heart, wondering what I'd just gotten myself into. I lasted 30 minutes before curiosity won out over obedience. I told myself I was just going to the library, that I needed a book to distract myself from the lingering heat of Alessandro's kiss. I told myself the guards outside my door were there to protect me, not imprison me, so walking through the house wasn't breaking any rules. I told myself a lot of lies that afternoon. The library was on the second floor, accessible through a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced Carusos glaring down at anyone who passed. I was halfway there when I heard voices coming from Alessandro's office, raised, angry voices that made me slow my steps. "Can't be serious about this girl," someone was saying. A man's voice, older, carrying authority. "She's a complication we don't need right now." "What I do with Emma Sterling is not your concern, Uncle." Alessandro's voice was cold enough to freeze. "Focus on finding the traitor in our ranks, not on my personal life. Your personal life becomes our concern when it threatens the family." The uncle, I didn't know his name, wasn't backing down. "You've made yourself vulnerable, Alessandro. You're distracted, soft, protective of a woman who means nothing in our world." "She means something to me. Since when do you let emotion dictate business decisions? Since someone tried to bury me alive." The explosion of rage made me flinch. I'd never heard Alessandro lose control, never heard that ice crack to reveal the fury beneath, since I woke up in a casket to find that the only person who gave a damn whether I lived or died was a waitress I'd never met. Since I realized that everyone in this room, everyone in this family, was perfectly content to let me suffocate in the ground as long as it served their purposes. Silence fell, heavy with shock. "You don't mean that," the uncle said, but he sounded uncertain now. "Don't I?" Alessandro's voice had returned to that dangerous quiet. "Someone poisoned me, Uncle. Someone who had access to my private quarters, my personal stock, my inner circle. Someone who knew my schedule well enough to time the dosage perfectly. That someone is either in this family or being protected by someone in this family. So forgive me if I'm more interested in the loyalty of a stranger who saved my life than the opinions of relatives who didn't even check to make sure I was actually dead." Footsteps approached the door. I turned to flee, but I wasn't fast enough. The door swung open, and Alessandro's uncle, a silver-haired man with Alessandro's golden eyes and twice his hardness, nearly collided with me. "Eavesdropping," he observed, his gaze raking over me with open disdain. How predictable. "I was going to the library," I said, lifting my chin despite the heat flooding my face. "I didn't mean to. She doesn't need to explain herself to you." Alessandro appeared in the doorway, and the look he gave his uncle could have stripped paint. "Emma, come here." I moved to his side, and his arm immediately wrapped around my waist, pulling me close in a gesture of possession that was clearly meant for his uncle's benefit. "This is my uncle, Roberto Caruso. He was just leaving." Roberto's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over, Alessandro." "Yes," Alessandro said flatly. "It is. Get out of my house, and don't come back until you're prepared to show respect to the people I choose to protect." Roberto left with a final, contemptuous glance in my direction. The moment the front door slammed, I felt Alessandro's grip on me loosen, though he didn't let go entirely. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know you told me to stay in my room. You're not a prisoner, Emma. You don't need to apologize for walking through a house you're living in." He guided me into his office, closing the door behind us. The room was masculine and imposing. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with books that looked read rather than decorative. But my uncle was right about one thing. "You were eavesdropping." "I didn't mean to. I heard voices and you wanted to know what they were saying about you." He moved to the bar in the corner, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. "I don't blame you. In your position, I'd have done the same." He handed me a glass, and I took it even though I rarely drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it steadied my nerves. Your uncle hates me. My uncle hates anything that threatens his influence over family decisions. You threaten that influence by existing. Alessandro settled into one of the leather chairs, gesturing for me to take the other. He's not wrong that you complicate things. But complications aren't always bad. Your whole family thinks I'm a problem. My whole family thinks anything that doesn't serve their immediate interests is a problem. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the liquid catch the light. They've forgotten what it means to value something beyond power and profit. If anything, Emma, you remind me that there's more to life than empire building. I sat, curling into the chair, and studied him. In this room, surrounded by the trappings of his power, he should have seemed invincible. Instead, he looked tired, the weight of suspicion and betrayal aging him beyond his 38 years. How do you live like this? I asked. Always suspicious, always guarded, never knowing who to trust. You learn to trust actions over words. Loyalty demonstrated over loyalty declared. His eyes met mine. You acted when everyone else performed. That's worth more than 1,000 declarations of allegiance. I just did what anyone would have done. No. He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. You did what a good person would have done. There's a difference. And in my world, good people are rare enough to be precious. The weight of his regard settled over me like a physical thing. He was looking at me like I was something valuable, something worth protecting, and I didn't know how to handle it. I'd spent so long being invisible, being dismissed, being alone, that this sudden importance felt like standing in a spotlight I hadn't asked for. I should go, I said, setting down my glass. Let you get back to finding who tried to kill you. Stay. He stood, moving to sit on the arm of my chair, close enough that I could feel his warmth. Please, just stay with me for a while. I'm tired of thinking about traitors and poison and family politics. I want to think about something good. I'm not that good, I whispered. You're good enough for me. His hand found mine, fingers threading through mine with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. And right now, Emma, that's all that matters. So I stayed. I sat in Alessandro Caruso's office while he told me stories about building his empire, about the mistakes he'd made and the prices he'd paid, about the loneliness of being at the top with no one to trust and nothing to lose. And I told him about my life, the parents I'd lost, the jobs I'd worked, the dreams I'd abandoned because survival took precedence over ambition. We talked until the sun set and shadows filled the office, until the guards changed shift outside and dinner was served and cleared away untouched. We talked like we were normal people, like there weren't armed men patrolling the grounds and investigations into attempted murder and families that wanted me gone. And when he finally walked me back to my room, his hand never leaving mine, I realized that somewhere in the past 4 days, I'd stopped being just the waitress who saved his life. I'd become the woman who was falling for a man who could destroy her. The breakthrough came on the 7th day, just when I was starting to believe that maybe, impossibly, I could build a life in this strange world Alessandro inhabited. I woke to shouting, not the controlled, cold anger I'd heard before, but genuine fury that shook the windows. I threw on clothes and ran downstairs, my guards following close behind, to find the entrance hall filled with people. Alessandro stood at the center, his face a mask of rage barely contained, while Dante held a man I'd never seen before by the collar. The man was bleeding from his nose, his expensive suit torn, his eyes wide with the kind of fear that came from knowing death was imminent. "Tell her," Alessandro commanded, his voice like gravel. "Tell Emma Sterling exactly what you did." The man's gaze found me on the stairs, and I saw recognition flash across his face. "I didn't know," he gasped. "I swear I didn't know she'd actually do it." "Who?" I descended the stairs slowly, drawn by something I couldn't name. "Who did what?" "My daughter." The man, older, graying, with the look of someone who'd been broken, struggled in Dante's grip. "Caterina, she was the one who poisoned Alessandro. She wanted to marry him, to unite our families, but he refused. So she decided to kill me and frame the Marchettis. Alessandro finished coldly, starting a war that would weaken both families and leave yours in a position to fill the power vacuum. I felt sick. This was about rejected marriage proposals and family politics, about power plays I couldn't begin to understand, and I'd walked right into the middle of it by saving Alessandro's life. "Where is she now?" Dante demanded. "Gone." The man's voice broke. "She ran when she heard you were alive. I don't know where." "You're lying." Alessandro moved with deadly grace, pulling a gun I hadn't known he was carrying and pressing it to the man's temple. "You're her father. You know exactly where she'd run to." "Alessandro." Sophia's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway to the dining room, looking calm despite the violence unfolding in her entrance hall. Not in front of Emma. Alessandro's eyes cut to me, and I saw the moment he remembered I was there, witnessing this. His jaw tightened, but he lowered the gun. "Dante, take him to the basement. Make him talk." "No!" The man struggled as Dante hauled him toward a door I'd never noticed before. "Please, I'll tell you everything. Just don't." The door closed on his pleas, and silence fell. Alessandro stood with his back to me, shoulders rigid, the gun still in his hand. I should have been horrified, should have been running for the exit, demanding to leave this house of violence and casual cruelty. Instead, I found myself walking toward him. "Alessandro," I said softly. He turned, and the look in his eyes stopped my heart. It was the look of a man who'd just shown his true nature to someone who mattered, who'd exposed the monster beneath the controlled facade and was waiting for the inevitable rejection. "This is who I am," he said flatly. "This is what I do. I torture information out of men who betray me. I kill people who threaten what's mine. I built my empire on blood and fear, and I do it again without hesitation." He took a step toward me, then stopped, like he was afraid to get too close. "So go ahead, Emma. Run. Tell me you can't handle this world, that you want out. I'll let you go. I'll make sure you're protected, set you up somewhere safe, give you enough money to start over. Just say the word." I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who'd brought me coffee in bed and learned how I liked it, who'd held my hand while telling me stories about his life, who'd kissed me like I was something precious, something worth protecting, who'd defended me to his family even when it cost him their support. "No," I said. He blinked. "No? No, I'm not running." I closed the distance between us, taking the gun from his hand and setting it on the hall table with shaking fingers. "I'm not stupid, Alessandro. I know what you are. I've known since the funeral what kind of man comes back from the dead with this much power, this much fear following his name. But I also know what you've been to me, and that matters more than what you are to everyone else." "You're insane," he breathed. But his hands came up to frame my face, holding me like I might disappear. "You should be terrified." "I am terrified," I admitted. "But not of you, of losing this, of going back to being invisible and alone and working myself to death just to survive. You make me feel seen, Alessandro. You make me feel like I matter. And maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe it makes me as morally compromised as everyone thinks. But I don't care." He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to convince himself I was real. I kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring every complicated emotion into it, the fear, and the desire, and the reckless certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, consequences be damned. "I love you," he said against my lips, the words rough and unpracticed. "I know it's too soon. I know it's insane. But I love you, Emma Sterling, and I will burn down anyone who tries to take you from me." My heart stopped, then started again, racing. "Alessandro, don't." His thumb pressed against my lips. "Don't say it back unless you mean it. Don't let this moment, this adrenaline, make you promise something you can't deliver." But I did mean it. Somewhere between waking up in his casket and this moment in his entrance hall, I'd fallen completely, irrevocably, in love with a man who shouldn't have been possible. A crime lord with gentle hands and fierce protection. A killer who brought me coffee and memorized how I took it. "I love you too," I whispered. "God help me, but I do." They found Katerina 3 hours later, hiding in a safe house outside the city. Alessandro left with Dante and a team of men, and I paced my room like a caged animal, waiting for news that didn't come. Sophia found me at sunset, carrying 2 glasses of wine and wearing an expression that was equal parts sympathy and concern. "He'll be back," she said, handing me a glass. Alessandro always comes back. What if he doesn't? The fear that had been building in my chest spilled out. What if Caterina has backup? What if this is a trap? What if you drive yourself crazy with what ifs? Sophia settled onto the window seat, gesturing for me to join her. "Emma, you need to understand something about my brother. He survived 3 assassination attempts, 2 gang wars, and our father's paranoia. He didn't build this empire by being careless. He'll handle Caterina and he'll come home to you." "You sound so sure." "I am sure." She studied me over her wine glass. "Because for the first time since our father died, Alessandro has something to come home to. Someone who sees him as more than just a weapon or a wallet. That makes him more dangerous than he's ever been." I sank onto the seat beside her. "Your uncle thinks I'm making him weak." "My uncle is an idiot who mistakes isolation for strength." Sophia's voice carried an edge. "Alessandro has been alone at the top for 10 years, trusting no one, letting no one close. It's made him powerful, but it's also made him vulnerable. Love doesn't weaken him, Emma. It gives him something to protect, and there's nothing more dangerous than a man protecting what he loves." "How do you do this?" I asked. "Live in this world of violence and betrayal and constant danger? You find something worth living for." She smiled, sad and knowing. "For Alessandro, that's you now. For me, it's family. What's left of it anyway. We all find our reasons to stay in the darkness." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Alessandro had given me a new one, secure and encrypted, with only a handful of numbers programmed in. His name flashed on the screen. "It's done. Coming home to you." A relief flooded through me so intensely I felt dizzy. "He's okay," I told Sophia. "He's coming back." "Told you." She stood, taking my empty wine glass. "Now, go make yourself presentable. When Alessandro walks through that door, he's going to need to see you whole and safe. It's the only thing that will bring him back from whatever he had to do tonight." I showered and changed into a simple dress. Midnight blue, fitted but modest. One of the many things that had appeared in my closet over the past week. I brushed my hair until it shone and tried not to think about what "it's done" meant. Whether Caterina was in custody or something more permanent. Whether the man I loved had just killed someone. Whether I could live with that answer. I heard the cars arrive, heard voices in the entrance hall, heard Alessandro's footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, tired, but purposeful. When he appeared in my doorway, there was blood on his shirt and exhaustion in his eyes. But he was whole. Alive. "Emma," he breathed. And then I was in his arms, breathing in his scent beneath the copper smell of blood, feeling his heart beat strong and steady against mine. "Are you hurt?" I pulled back, checking him for injuries with shaking hands. "Not my blood." He caught my hands, stilling them. "Caterina's dead. She tried to run, pulled a gun on Dante. He didn't have a choice. I should have felt something about that. Horror, maybe, or guilt. Instead, I just felt relief that it was over, that the threat was eliminated, that Alessandro was safe. What did that make me? "I'm sorry," he said, misreading my silence. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. Death and blood and—" I kissed him, cutting off his apology. "I signed up for you," I said against his lips. "All of you. The good and the terrible and everything in between. So stop apologizing for being who you are." He lifted me, and I wrapped my legs around his waist as he carried me to the bed. "I need you," he said roughly. "I need to feel something besides death and rage. I'm here." I cupped his face, making him look at me. "I'm right here, Alessandro, and I'm not going anywhere." What happened next was inevitable, had been building since that first moment in the funeral home, when his eyes opened to find me. He laid me down like I was something precious, something sacred, and showed me with his hands and mouth exactly what I'd come to mean to him. And I showed him the same, that I chose him. Chose this. Chose a life that made no sense but felt more right than anything ever had. Afterward, We lay tangled together, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. Outside, guards patrolled and the estate settled into night. Inside this room, for this moment, we were just two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. "Marry me," Alessandro said into the darkness. I went still. "What?" "Marry me." He shifted so he could see my face. "I know it's fast. I know you should say no. But I almost died, Emma, and the only thing I could think about when I woke up was that I'd wasted so much time being alone when I could have been building something real. So marry me. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you and loving you and making up for every moment you've ever felt invisible." I should have said it was too soon. Should have pointed out that we'd known each other barely a week, that this was insane, that marriages built on intensity rather than foundation never lasted. Instead, I said, "Yes." His smile transformed his face from beautiful to radiant. "Yes. Yes. I'll marry you, Alessandro Caruso. Even though it's crazy and fast and probably going to end in disaster," I kissed him softly, "because I'd rather have a short time being truly alive with you than a long time being invisible alone." He pulled me closer, and I felt him relax in a way I hadn't seen before, like some fundamental tension had finally released. "I'll make you happy," he promised. "Whatever it takes, however long I have. I'll make sure you never regret this." "I know you will," I said, and meant it. Outside, the world continued its dangerous dance, but here, in this room, in this moment, we were safe. We were together, and that was enough. The wedding happened fast, too fast by normal standards, but nothing about us had ever been normal. 2 weeks after I said yes, I stood in a private chapel on the Caruso estate, wearing a dress that cost more than I'd made in my entire life, preparing to marry a man who'd been dead when I met him. Sophia stood beside me as my maid of honor, adjusting my veil with gentle hands. "You're sure about this?" she asked, not for the first time. "Once you're a Caruso, there's no going back to your old life. You'll be part of this family, with all the protection and danger that brings." I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was almost unrecognizable, hair swept up in an elegant twist, makeup applied by a professional, wrapped in ivory silk that hugged every curve. But my eyes were the same, still uncertain, still a little afraid, still mine. "I'm sure," I said. "I've never been more sure of anything." The chapel was small but stunning, filled with white roses and candlelight. Alessandro had wanted something private, intimate, with only family and his most trusted people in attendance. No spectacle, no political maneuvering, just us, making promises that would bind us together for whatever time we had. The music started, and Sophia squeezed my hand before taking her place at the altar. Dante appeared at my side. Alessandro had asked him to walk me down the aisle, a gesture that had surprised us both. "He loves you," Dante said quietly as we began walking. "I've known Alessandro for 15 years, and I've never seen him like this. You've changed him." "He's changed me too," I admitted. Alessandro stood at the altar in a black suit that fit him like sin, his hair swept back, his golden eyes fixed on me with such intensity that I almost stumbled. He looked like every dangerous fantasy I'd never let myself have. Powerful and beautiful and completely focused on me, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. When I reached him, he took my hands in his, and I felt the slight tremor in his fingers. Alessandro Caruso, crime lord and killer, was nervous. The realization made me love him even more. The priest began the ceremony, his voice echoing in the small chapel. I barely heard the words. All I could focus on was Alessandro, on the way he looked at me like I'd hung the moon, on the promises we were making that went deeper than tradition or law. "Do you, Alessandro Caruso, take Emma Sterling to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, certain. "I'll protect her with my life. I'll cherish her above all else. I'll make sure she never regrets choosing me." Those weren't the traditional vows, but they were so perfectly him that my throat tightened with emotion. "And do you, Emma Sterling, take Alessandro Caruso to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I looked into his eyes and saw our future there, dangerous and beautiful and unpredictable. I do. I'll stand beside him through everything. I'll be his partner and his equal. I'll love him even when the world says I shouldn't. Alessandro's grip on my hands tightened, and I saw something that looked like tears glimmer in his eyes. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Alessandro pulled me close, one hand sliding into my hair, the other wrapping around my waist. He kissed me with a tenderness that contradicted everything the world knew about him, pouring every promise and hope and desperate need into that single moment. I kissed him back, tasting salt. His tears or mine, I couldn't tell, and feeling something settle in my chest that I'd been missing my entire life. This was home. Not the estate or the chapel or the city, but this man, these arms, this impossible love that shouldn't have worked but did. When we finally broke apart, the small gathering erupted in applause. Sophia was crying openly. Dante was smiling, actually smiling, which I'd never seen before. And even Alessandro's uncle Roberto, who'd been forced to attend for family unity, looked grudgingly approving. "Mrs. Caruso," Alessandro murmured against my ear as we walked back down the aisle. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," I admitted. "And perfect." "Good." He squeezed my hand. "That's exactly how it should be." The reception was held in the estate's ballroom, the same room where I'd stopped his funeral 2 weeks ago. Someone had transformed it from a house of mourning into something magical. Crystal chandeliers blazed with light, white flowers covered every surface, and a string quartet played soft music that filled the space with beauty. I danced with Alessandro for our first dance, swaying to music I didn't recognize while he held me close and whispered promises against my hair. Then, I danced with Dante, who proved surprisingly graceful, and even Roberto, who told me stiffly that I'd done well by his nephew. But mostly I stayed at Alessandro's side, his arm around my waist, his presence a constant anchor. I watched him interact with his people, the deference they showed him, the respect and fear that followed his every word. This was my life now. I was the wife of the most powerful crime lord in the city, the woman who'd somehow captured the heart of a man everyone said didn't have one. "You're thinking too much," Sophia said, appearing at my elbow with champagne. "I can see the wheels turning. I'm just processing," I said. "This morning I was Emma Sterling, waitress. Now I'm Emma Caruso, Mafia wife. It's a lot." "You were never just a waitress." Sophia clinked her glass against mine. "You were always the woman brave enough to speak up when no one else would. That's why Alessandro loves you. That's why you'll survive this world." "Will I?" The question came out smaller than I intended. "Survive it? You already have." She gestured around the ballroom. "You survived someone trying to kill your husband. You survived being thrust into a world you didn't understand. You survived falling in love with the most dangerous man in the city. Everything from here is just details." I wanted to believe her, wanted to think that the hard part was over, that we could settle into some version of normal married life. But I knew better. This was just the beginning. There would be more threats, more violence, more moments where I'd have to choose between my conscience and my love. But looking at Alessandro across the room, watching him laugh at something Dante said, seeing the way his eyes constantly found me like he needed to confirm I was still there, I knew I'd make the same choice every time. We left the reception early, stealing away while the party continued without us. Alessandro drove us himself. No guards, no security. Just us in one of his less conspicuous cars, to a house I'd never seen before. "Where are we?" I asked as we pulled up to a modest beach house, nothing like the estate's grandeur, somewhere no one knows about except me. He came around to open my door, helping me out with a hand that lingered on mine. "I bought it years ago as a safe house. Never told anyone, never used it. I was saving it for something important." "And this is important?" "You're important." He unlocked the door and swept me into his arms, carrying me over the threshold in a gesture so traditional it made me laugh. I wanted one place where we could be just Alessandro and Emma. No guards, no business, no family, just us. The house was small but beautiful. Open floor plan, walls of windows facing the ocean, decorated simply but with care. Someone had been here recently, I realized. There were fresh flowers on the table, champagne chilling in a bucket, candles waiting to be lit. "You planned this," I said as he set me down. "I plan everything." He pulled me close, his hands finding the zipper of my wedding dress. "Except you. You were the one thing I never saw coming." Good surprise or bad surprise? The best surprise. He kissed my neck, my shoulder, each inch of skin he exposed as the dress fell away. The surprise that saved my life in more ways than one. We made love on every surface of that little beach house, slow and tender, then desperate and intense, then lazy and playful as the night stretched into dawn. Between rounds, we talked about everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood, about watching his father build an empire through ruthlessness and fear. I told him about losing my parents, about the loneliness that had defined my adult life. "I used to dream about being invisible," I admitted as we lay tangled in sheets, watching the sun rise over the ocean. "About being so unremarkable that no one would notice me, hurt me, leave me." "And now?" Alessandro's fingers traced lazy patterns on my spine. "Now I'm married to the most visible man in the city. Now I'm anything but invisible." I propped myself up on his chest, looking down at him. "It's terrifying. I know." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "But you're not alone in it anymore. Whatever comes, we face it together. Promise?" "I promise." He pulled me down for a kiss that tasted like forever. "You're mine, Emma Caruso, and I protect what's mine with everything I have." We stayed at the beach house for 3 days, hiding from the world and learning each other in ways that went beyond physical. I learned that Alessandro couldn't cook to save his life but made excellent coffee. He learned that I sang off-key in the shower and read poetry when I thought he wasn't paying attention. We built a foundation in those 3 days, not based on intensity or danger, but on the quiet moments between. On the 4th morning, reality intruded in the form of Dante's phone call. There were business matters that couldn't wait, decisions that required Alessandro's presence. Our honeymoon bubble popped, and we drove back to the estate in comfortable silence, my hand in his. "Ready?" he asked, as we pulled through the gates. "No," I admitted, "but I'll do it anyway." He smiled, fierce and proud. "That's my girl." The months that followed weren't easy. I had to learn to navigate a world where loyalty was currency, and weakness meant death. I attended dinners with families whose empires were built on blood, smiled at women who saw me as an interloper, and learned to read the subtle signs that indicated danger. But I also found my place. I started working with Sophia on the legitimate businesses, using my years of service industry experience to identify problems and implement solutions. Alessandro gave me real responsibility, real power, and I discovered that I was good at it. Better than good. I was exceptional. "You should see the numbers from the restaurants," Sophia told me 6 months into my marriage, reviewing reports in Alessandro's office. "Since you implemented those changes, profits are up 30%. "It's just basic customer service," I said, but I couldn't hide my pride. Treating employees well, listening to their concerns, actually investing in the businesses instead of just extracting profit. It's revolutionary in our world. Alessandro looked up from his own work, and the pride in his eyes made my heart swell. "You're changing how we do business, Emma. Making us stronger without making us crueler." I'd also changed him. Or maybe I'd just revealed parts of himself he'd buried. He smiled more now, laughed with real joy instead of cold amusement. He was still dangerous, still ruthless when necessary, but he'd found balance, and I'd found purpose. Not everything was perfect. There were still threats. Rival families testing our defenses, internal disputes that required Alessandro's iron hand, moments when I was reminded exactly what kind of man I'd married, but we faced them together, and that made all the difference. 1 year after our wedding, I woke to Alessandro kissing my shoulder. His hand splayed possessively over my stomach. "Morning," I murmured, still half asleep. "Good morning, Mrs. Caruso." He nuzzled my neck. "How are you feeling?" "Fine." "Why?" "Because you threw up yesterday morning, and the morning before that." His hand moved in gentle circles. "And you've been exhausted lately, falling asleep before dinner." I froze, my brain putting pieces together. My missed period. the nausea, the bone-deep tiredness that no amount of sleep seemed to fix. "Oh," I breathed. "Oh." Alessandro pulled back to look at me, and I saw hope and fear warring in his eyes. "Emma, I might be pregnant." The words felt huge, life-changing. "I didn't even realize. I've been so busy with the restaurants and—" He kissed me, cutting off my rambling with a tenderness that made my eyes sting. "We should find out for sure." Dr. Reeves confirmed it 3 hours later. I was 8 weeks pregnant, healthy, carrying Alessandro Caruso's child. The news should have terrified me, bringing a baby into this world of violence and danger. Instead, I felt a fierce joy I hadn't expected. "We're having a baby," I said wonderingly, as Alessandro drove us home, his hand never leaving mine. "We're having a baby," he repeated, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Emma, He pulled over abruptly, turning to face me with tears streaming down his face. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife I love, a child, a family that's mine, that I built on something other than fear. You gave me that. You gave me everything." I unbuckled my seatbelt and climbed into his lap, holding him while he cried, this powerful, dangerous man breaking down with joy in the front seat of his car. "We gave it to each other," I whispered. "This life, this family, this impossible happiness. We built it together." Our daughter was born on a spring morning, screaming her fury at the world with lungs that would have made her grandfather proud. We named her Isabella, after Alessandro's mother, and she had his golden eyes and my stubborn chin. I held her in the hospital room, Alessandro beside me with one finger caught in her tiny fist, and marveled at the journey that had brought us here, from a funeral where I'd stopped to save a stranger's life, to this moment, holding our daughter while the man I loved looked at us like we'd hung the moon. "She's perfect," Alessandro whispered, awe evident in every syllable. "She's ours," I corrected, and kissed him softly. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Raising a child in Alessandro's world would bring challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But looking at my family, my husband and daughter, bound together by love that shouldn't have worked but did, I knew we'd face them the same way we'd faced everything else, together. I'd gone from invisible waitress to Mafia wife, from saving a stranger's life to building a family with him. I'd found love in a casket and a future in the darkness. And I wouldn't change a single moment of it. Because sometimes the best things in life come from the moments that make the least sense. From stopping a funeral to save a man who was supposed to be dead. From taking a chance on impossible love and finding out it was the realest thing you'd ever known. Alessandro Caruso had been dead when I met him, but together, we'd never been more alive.